No need to buckle up. You're in for a smooth ride. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the 181st episode of the Inbound Sales Podcast. I'm Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. And today, as always, we have an interesting guest, Mr. Harry Campbell, the rideshare guy. I don't want to take away a lot of the thunder, but if you saw the headlines, you see that in 2009, he was a newly graduated aerospace engineer, and now he is driving over 500,000 page views on not his first, not his second, not even his third blog, but he stuck with it. He found a niche, he found an opportunity, he found a need, and he went and he filled it. And he's doing it in the rideshare industry of all things. Go figure. I found Harry, actually found me, followed me on Twitter, followed him back. We had a short little dialogue. I looked at his website, checked out his profile. It looked kind of interesting, but I wasn't really sure how big or how successful it was. He asked to come on the show. Again, I did a little bit more research. I was like, yeah, he looked interesting, interesting business. And man, am I glad I did. The tips and the advice and the insight he provides in this is fantastic. Get ready to take a lot of notes, and I think you will learn a lot about finding that need and filling it, but also being persistent, okay? There was no easy button. He had some early wins, but then he had some setbacks and some losses, but he stuck with it, and he applied what he learned from those setbacks to create his eventual success, which really was pretty quick as you look back on this. But if you are in need of a kick start, of a shot in the arm, of a jolt, a boost, and you would like to surround yourself with 5 other motivated entrepreneurs to grow your business quickly, check out the5.us. It's a new program I'm rolling out. Come here to Southern California, spend 2.5 days with me and 5 other motivated entrepreneurs. Once you get here, everything is covered. Your food, your lodging, your entertainment, and your learning and growth. So again, check out the5.us to come hang out with me in SoCal. And now on with the show. Harry Campbell, the rideshare guy all the way from Los Angeles, California. How the heck are you?
I'm doing well. Just enjoying another fine day in Southern California.
It's too dang hot, man. It's not be this hot on February 29th, but oh well. So, hey, man, thanks for reaching out. Ran across you on Twitter, and you've got a podcast. You got an interesting website. But for those that may not know you, would you mind telling us a little quick story about who you are and what you do, and we'll dive down the rabbit hole?
Sure, definitely. So basically, I run a blog and podcast for rideshare drivers. So anyone who's an Uber driver or a Lyft driver, or really anyone kind of considering work in the on-demand economy, I run a blog that basically helps them with everything from getting started to even more kind of informational topics like taxes and insurance. And I focus a lot on how to maximize your profits as a rideshare driver. And I've really developed a community around rideshare drivers that's probably kind of like the number one community for anyone working in the on-demand industry.
That is crazy. There's a million ways to make money in this world, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. The opportunities are everywhere, and especially coming from my former career as an engineer, I would say that it's pretty... If you would have asked me 2 years ago if I'd be full-time blogging about this rideshare industry, I would have told you were crazy, and now I'm doing it. So,
all right. So how does one make the shift from engineering to blogging about ride-sharing?
Well, I studied engineering in college. I graduated from UC San Diego in 2009 with a degree in aerospace engineering. And believe it or not, I went to work as an aerospace engineer. So put that degree to good use. And about a year or two in, I started my first blog just on the side. It was a little hobby personal finance blog called Your PF Pro, which I still own today. And it really just kind of taught me a lot about creating content and just figuring out what I like to do and what people would read and what people wouldn't read. And it was a very competitive and crowded space, being a personal finance blog, tens of thousands of other sites there. And I learned a lot. My site never really took off, but that was kind of what inspired me to learn a lot about online marketing and really kind of start becoming a better writer, to be honest, because I used to be a horrible writer. And not that I'm much better today, but now I'm at least respectable. And that's kind of what got me started thinking about it. And couple of years later, I actually became a rideshare driver myself. I started driving for Uber and Lyft, and that was really what made me start thinking about doing a blog on the topic.
All right, very interesting. And is that you just trying to pay off some student debt or what? I mean, what compels or propels somebody to become a rideshare driver?
Well, definitely. I mean, kind of the nice thing that I quickly discovered about being a rideshare driver, that there are a lot of parallels to being a business owner and to running your own business, because you actually, as you get paid $10.99 as a driver. Really, if you work for any of these on-demand services, they all use $10.99 contractors. And whether you realize it or not, you're now your own business, right? You have to file a Schedule C. You have to think about taxes, estimated tax payments, insurance, liability, all that good stuff. Most people don't really think about that as drivers, but for me, I almost kind of looked at it as like practice for starting my own business, which I didn't really realize would eventually be a blog about the industry, but it was kind of cool to see how it all played out. And I mean, for me, it was really just about kind of finding, my wife is in med school, so I have a lot of free time, I guess you would say. She's pretty busy. She's a busy girl. And for me, it was kind of just keeping occupied, finding something that was kind of fun and kind of cool, but also I could make a little bit of money at it too. So that was really what got me started in driving. And within a few weeks, I actually had my blog up and running, The Rideshare Guy.
Is that because you just started looking for information? There just wasn't any out there, and you said, hey, let me apply my analytical engineering skills about taxes and whatever, and experiences blogging, and was it just a match made in heaven?
Yeah, you should change the name of your podcast to the Mind Reader. That's exactly what happened.
It's funny what a good salesman can pull out of somebody.
The blog whisperer. So basically, that's exactly what happened. I mean, I wish I could point to one catalyzing event that made me become a driver or really start the blog even, but it was just I started driving just because it was something I didn't really know. I wasn't expecting to start a blog. I wasn't expecting something huge to come out of it. I just wanted to try it and see what would happen. And within a week or two, I just was obviously Googling for information. I was looking for online communities, forums, Facebook groups, and I was finding some, but I wasn't finding anyone who was really authoritative, right? Anyone who was like, man, this guy is a boss at rideshare. You need to follow him. You need to listen to him. And a light bulb went off in my head. I mean, there were 100,000 drivers at the time. Uber was maybe worth $10 or $15 billion. And those numbers I think Uber's now $63 billion, and there's 400,000 or 500,000 drivers in the U.S. So at the time, I thought the opportunity was huge with way less numbers. And so I kind of just right then and there, with it, that weekend, I think I sat down and figured it all out and started blogging really just about my experience, what it was like to be a driver and exactly how much money I was making. And that's how it all got started.
So tell me those numbers again, that they're at 400,000 drivers and $65 billion?
So Uber, the company itself, is valued, I think, at $62.5 billion.
Wow.
And most recently, they announced a few months ago that they had 400,000 drivers. And they don't announce a whole lot of data points, but it's safe to say they're still signing up tens of thousands of drivers every month. And for me, I kind of look at all those guys as new customers, right? How do I reach them? How do I find them?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of mad because now my mother-in-law is charging me to take her grandkids to get ice cream. That just ain't right, man. You got to draw the line somewhere.
Hey, I have a big population of baby boomers, actually, who are drivers. A lot of baby boomers like driving for Uber because they can combine it with their Social Security. They combine it with their spouse's income. So one of the guys I interviewed on my podcast actually said that his wife was tired of seeing him around the house. So she said, you got to get out of here. You got to go do something.
Dang.
So he signed up to drive for Uber.
Well, I love this in that, so here's a company with 100,000 drivers worth $10 to $15 billion. And most people would say, oh, that thing's run its course. That's a mature industry. That, I need to go look for something else. But you jump in and it grows 4X in drivers, right? And it grows at least 4, maybe 5 or 6X, depending on, the exact valuation at the time. But I mean, that's exponential growth from an already huge company. So, the lesson there is see the opportunity, take it, right? I mean, don't assume something is played out because, you were still getting in at the
honestly,
$10 billion ground level, right?
Yeah, honestly, and especially when I started, I was thinking to myself, well, there's really no one else doing this. So I was thinking to myself, man, this is either a really good idea or a really bad idea. And that's generally what happens when you're the only one kind of doing something, or you get in at the ground level. So I'll definitely say that it ended up really working in my favor, because with working online, or especially when you're starting a blog, you don't do it to make money. You don't start a blog to make money. It's a nice byproduct at times, and it can not often, but it can develop into something bigger, like it did for me. But I will say at the beginning, I mean, I was working 20 to 30 hours a week on my blog, writing content, promoting the heck out of it, talking to every driver I could find online, and really getting my stuff out there to them. And this was all on top of my day job. I don't know how many people are willing to do that for 3, 6, 9, 12 months before you see your first dollar. So it's more of a long game than anything, that's for sure.
So how long did it take you till you saw your first dollar?
Well, I would say that it was probably a lot quicker than other blogs, because within about 2 to 3 months, I had a little bit of traction. And the companies at the time, when I started my blog, the companies, Uber and Lyft particularly, were paying anywhere from a couple $100 to $500 referral fees to drivers for signing up new drivers. I actually signed up for Lyft first, and I got a $500 bonus to do one ride with Uber. That was kind of like the steal a Lyft driver promotion, what I called it.
So tell me that again. So Lyft was paying you to steal an Uber driver?
So Uber was actually paying drivers. So Uber, there's Lyft drivers and there's Uber drivers. Uber drivers, basically like a traditional affiliate program, they would send emails out to all their drivers and say, hey, if you have friends that want to sign up to be Uber drivers, here's a referral link. Get them to sign up using your code. And they're paying $200 to $300 for those drivers. Mm-hmm. They actually ran a couple promotions that lasted for almost a year, where if you were an Uber driver and you knew someone who was a Lyft driver, you could get them over to Uber and have them do one or sometimes 15 to 20 rides, you would get $500 and they would get $500. So those referral fees were pretty crazy, and they've definitely died down since.
Right.
And I mean, when I started my blog, I was kind of at the tail end of it, or at least what I thought was the tail end. And once I had a little bit of traction, I started seeing a couple of those referrals come in here and there. So it was definitely nice to get like a little $500 bonus here and there just for doing one referral, or $200 or $300, because that definitely kept me going. I don't know if I would have hit it quite so hard in that first year if I didn't have a little bit of income coming in from time to time.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And, and I've always told people, when I started the Sales Whisperer, I was just doing sales training and my own stuff, just me delivering training. It was content. I had licensed from a guy. So it wasn't my content, at least originally. I kind of made it my own, and it morphed. But then I got into Infusionsoft. I bought it for myself, and then just started talking about it because they had a lucrative referral or affiliate program, partner program it evolved into. And, I've made great money representing other just good products, right?
Definitely.
So I'm always telling people, you can quickly make money. It may be small. I mean, I get little checks from Amazon for books that I recommend or whatever, but other programs that I use.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's the thing. When you're first getting started too, and you're getting a couple $100 or a few $100 there, and it's side income, and you're doing something that you're passionate about, it's pretty good feeling. I think if I was working full time at that and I was relying on it to pay my bills and getting those $200 or $300 checks, then you're in a much different situation, because that might not be enough to feed your family or to even live on. So I think that definitely it's kind of nice to find those, those kind of initial starter products. I mean, I've really diversified my income since, which we could probably get into later, but that was definitely something that was like a really nice added bonus at the beginning.
Right. I mean, that's fantastic. So you start monetizing it that way, and then how were you finding Uber drivers to interview? Was it face-to-face, or were you doing Skype calls like this, or how did you start getting that content?
I mean, obviously I was interviewing people on my podcast just straight from my readership. I was finding a lot of the articles, though, that I was doing was really based off my personal experience as a driver. So I would go out and drive for Uber, drive for Lyft. I would do both apps at the same time, which was kind of like a strategy that I talked about on my site, since you're independent contractor, so you're allowed to do multiple apps at once, and kind of the strategies behind that. And I was really giving out like detailed analysis. So that's really kind of the type of content I was producing at first. And the podcast was always either interviews with a driver, just about, kind of like black car drivers. These are Uber drivers who are like at the more luxury level, and people. And then, I would even do solo podcasts. So that was the type of content I was putting out. As far as for like marketing it though to other drivers and really getting it out there, I really started at a grassroots level. I mean, I kind of went and looked for where were there existing communities of drivers. And this was kind of a unique situation because it was a very, immature, I guess you would say, new community, right? There were groups forming on Facebook. There was one forum at the time that was sort of small. There was a group of drivers on Reddit. And those were really the first three places I started. There was a forum called Uber People, a Reddit thread for Uber drivers, and Facebook groups that I could find. And that's really where I started kind of promoting my content. And like, obviously, anyone who's promoted their content online has probably run into trouble or problems with spamming people, right? Like, no one wants you posting their links. So for me, it was just like guerrilla warfare. I was just like one-on-one. Every single person that I could talk to, I wasn't posting my links. I was just helping them, just giving them value, answering all their questions. And then I would send a personal message like with an article that I'd written and say, hey, if you want more information, here's an article I touched on, expanded on here, or just like in general, here's my site that helps drivers after I've kind of shown value to them and provided value. And obviously that's only scalable up to a certain point, but that was really kind of the strategy I took because I was looking at, hey, where are there existing communities of drivers, and like what avenues can I leverage to get this thing off the ground?
Yeah, I love that though. And it's so for two reasons. One, you're talking about just helping, right? Mm-hmm. Start kind of like, Gary Vaynerchuk talks about, jab, 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 right hook, so give before you ask. And then just that one-on-one. I mean, I think too many people are lulled into sleep, into thinking, hey, I just got to get a Snapchat account and a Twitter account, and man, I'm just going to go make money because it's just so good, and I'm just so good, and everybody needs this. And I mean, it's just rarely that easy.
Yeah. And that's actually something that I honestly haven't thought a whole lot about until you kind of brought it up right now. I mean, that's really been one of my strategies since the beginning. Like even today, I mean, I still respond to every single email that I get. It may not be a super in-depth and long email. And I mean, my site had 500,000 page views last month. So you can imagine how many emails I get, but I'm responding to every single email that I get, trying to provide value, trying to help. And most of the time it's, a question that's something about like contacting Uber or something about like, how much money can I make in this situation? And I have content that I've already created around a lot of those questions. So I'll just say, hey, that's a great question. Here's a link to the article that I wrote that will answer your exact question. But it's still like that personal touch that I think people really value, and it's never been something I've been able to track, but I know that there are drivers out there just telling every single driver they know of, like, hey, you got to check out this guy's site. Not only does he have good content, but when you reach out to him, he like actually responds. I know that's a cool feeling for me when I reach out to other people.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, 500,000 page views is fantastic as well. And you've been doing this how long? Just a couple years?
So my site, I started it 2 years ago, and I actually quit my full-time job as an engineer to focus on the blog 1 year ago. So I've been doing it full-time 1 year and a total of 2 years.
Wow, that's amazing. So now how else are you monetizing? Are you doing pay-per-click ads or, sponsored ads or?
So I actually haven't done any paid marketing in my whole rideshare guy career yet. And that's for two reasons. One, it's because I'm cheap. And two, it's because I don't really know a whole lot about paid marketing. I know how to, if people want to give me money, I'm really good at that. But spending money is and I think it's a different skill. And it's not one that I really had. My skills, especially at the start, were creating content and building community. So that's what I really tried to focus a lot of my time on. The ways I've been able to monetize is still off of those driver referrals. That's been a really nice kind of almost an easy opportunity because I'm talking about Uber, Lyft, and now I cover Postmates and DoorDash, which are two on-demand delivery companies that deliver food, fast food, restaurant food, whatever. Yeah. And so I've been covering those. And it's pretty straightforward because I talk about my experience with these companies, the good and the bad. I'm trying to be very fair and unbiased. And I say, if you want to use my link to sign up for these companies, here it is. And so that's kind of a big way. And I've also in my first year, I took the really low-hanging monetization opportunities. So if these companies already had existing driver referral programs, since I was a driver for all of them, I just used them. If companies reached out to me and wanted to do some type of partnership, I did that.
Right.
But it really wasn't until I left my job about a year ago and I had, about 100,000 page views a month. I had some traction, I had some following, and I started thinking to myself, all right, now I worked for a whole year building up my community, building up trust and following. Now is when I can start to find those good products and those good advertising opportunities. So in the past year, that's when I've really hit the ground running and started working directly with advertisers. I even recently, last month, hired a guy full-time to do advertising and partnership type work. So we have a couple clients, like for example, Intuit is one of our big clients because all these drivers have to do taxes, right?
Sure.
So TurboTax, they have to track their income and expenses, QuickBooks Self-Employed. So really any company that's trying to target independent workers, drivers, people that are kind of running their own micro businesses. And if they want to target Uber drivers, there's kind of no better place for them to come than me. So those are a lot of the types of companies I've worked with. And, on the advertising side, I've even kind of developed an insurance marketplace, which has been pretty cool, that offers rideshare friendly insurance.
Nice.
So that was kind of one that we just stumbled upon. Literally just like an agent reached out to us and asked if they could be listed on our website and be paid, and they would pay us. And so we created really more of like a resource that, listed the different options by state, and we started working with individual agents. And then, of course, I created a video training course for drivers, which I basically walk them through the entire steps of getting set up to kind of more advanced strategies. So those are kind of like my 3 or 4 main monetization sources.
So I'm looking at your site here, and it looks good. Is this WordPress?
Yeah, it's WordPress,
okay.
And I'm proud to say that's the same $50 WordPress theme I've ran since the beginning.
Nice. So which theme is it?
I think it's a Genesis theme. I'm not sure the exact name. I can look it up later, but it's a Genesis theme. I'm a big Genesis fan, so every site I've built in the past few years has been on Genesis. And I've had my web guy make a bunch of customizations since. Sure. But I mean, for me, I think a lot of people actually tend to get caught up in the stuff that's not core to their business. For me, my business is creating content. So as long as it's readable and the content is really good and top notch, that's really kind of what I spend 90% of my time on. And obviously I've made tweaks to the site here and there, but even 2 years in, I haven't done like a big site redesign or anything just because I don't think it's that important to my business. I'm sure at some point I will need to, but for now it's still even kind of on the back burner. So that's really the strategy I've taken there.
That's awesome. You got Sumo Me running, so that's a great tool for a little pop-up on the bottom.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I'm testing right now the Sumo Me Welcome Mat, which is a new feature that basically just drops down. It's a huge drop down and it takes up the whole screen. Sure. But from people that I've talked to, they say it's like increasing their conversions like 4, 5x, 2, 3x. It's pretty crazy from what I've heard.
Nice.
So definitely something I'll be testing very soon.
So how often are you like researching things like that and testing? I mean, are you always tinkering with plugins and testing things like that, or does your web guy bring up ideas, things for you to test?
To be honest, like I kind of come from not the online marketing world. I've never really, the only guy I've ever followed since the beginning has been Pat Flynn. I mean, He probably covers like every topic that someone like in my position would need. And anytime, when I wanted to launch my course, he had a couple podcasts about that. When I was looking at self-publishing a book, which I haven't done yet, but I'm looking into, he had stuff on that. And obviously things like lead-in magnets and all those kind of online marketing 101. For me, I look at all the like really low-hanging fruits. And I also know that stuff is not my specialty either. So I kind of go and see what the top guys are doing, and I do stuff very similar. So I don't do a whole lot of like A/B testing. If it's a really easy kind of simple thing, I'll go ahead and do it. I mean, what I really like to do is look and see what other top bloggers are doing. What are they doing? If I know them personally, I'll reach out to them. But most of the time, it's just kind of observing. I think being really observant can help a lot. I mean, the top bloggers in any field are probably spending tens of thousands or maybe even hundreds of thousands on web guys, online marketing guys. See what they're doing, especially if you're some small guy. Even like me, I'm a small guy compared to them. See what they're doing. and then do it on your site, right?
Yep.
It doesn't take like a rocket scientist to know if they're doing this, they're probably doing it for a reason. You might as well do it too, right?
Yep. Amen. I mean, I always say that, success leaves clues, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's the thing, like some of these bloggers are very transparent in what they do, but I really think being observant, I mean, you can learn a lot just by seeing what other people are doing and like asking questions to yourself, like why do they do this? Why do they do that? Opting into their email list, seeing what their flow is like, and kind of you don't have to copy them exactly, but maybe there's a few quick things you can do today that will, help your business 10x, right? That's kind of what I'm always looking for, those big low-hanging fruits, take advantage of them.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how often, I'm looking here, are you blogging, would you say several times a week? It looks like almost every day, but not quite.
I've stayed very consistent. And that's one of the things I think is really important too for new bloggers or really anyone creating content is just to stay consistent. And I think a lot of people will start out with 2-3 posts a week. They'll be crushing it, right? 3 months later, 6 months later, start to get a little bit burnt out, starts to be a little bit of a drain. And for me, I started off doing 3 articles a week, and I've since about a year ago, I increased to 4 articles a week. So for the past year straight, I've done 4 articles every single week. And, not myself. I have a team now of a few writers that help me out. Me personally, I do 1 article every week, 1 podcast every 2 weeks, and 2 YouTube videos almost every single week. So me personally, I'm very consistent, probably like 95% consistent, if that makes sense, on staying on that schedule. But overall, we've done 4 articles a week for the past year, every single week. So that's kind of the schedule that we do and really pretty much what we stick to. So now I kind of employ a team of writers and I have more people helping me out as I've scaled things. But that's definitely, I don't think that I produce like an insane amount of content, but I still feel like every article is still really impactful and meaningful.
So are these writers, are they just contract writers, or are they the same writers? Or do you accept like guest contributions?
Yeah, so I think that I kind of used a really unique content strategy, and it's one that I sort of developed from what I was doing. I mean, when I first started, right, obviously I was the only writer, and the things that I was talking about were based off firsthand experience, right? I think a lot of people started following me because, like we talked about earlier, there were some pretty big referral payouts, right? And so you can imagine that there are drivers out there blogging about their experience, saying how awesome it is, right? Hey, Uber is the best. You got to sign up right now. Get on this train. The money train's leaving. Come join me, right? Obviously they don't really disclose that they'll get $500 if you sign up, or $200 or $300. And for me, having a little bit of experience with online marketing and kind of knowing that, right, how important it is to be authentic, and especially looking at it from a longer term view, right, I kind of established this trust where I highlighted the good, but I also highlighted the bad, right? There's a lot of cool things about being a driver. You can turn on the app and go work literally whenever and wherever you want, but the support from Uber is very poor, right? They lower prices periodically, right? So there's all these the bad side, kind of, I call it the dark side of rideshare. But I try to cover both sides really fairly, and I think a lot of people could empathize with that. And so when I started hiring writers, what was honestly the most important thing to me was that they were a driver themselves. So every single writer, and even the guy that I just hired full-time, has all come from my audience in particular and the driver pool. So they've all been drivers. I'll see a Facebook comment, or I'll see a tweet, or even an email, and I'll just say, hey, are you interested in doing a guest post? And that's for 2 reasons. It's because I think it's cool to have guest posts and like interact with your community in that way. But it's also so that I can source writers, so that I can see 2 things. First of all, are they going to get back to me in a timely manner? If they say they're going to have a guest post for me in 4 days, are they going to have that? Because I can't pay my guest writers a whole lot of money, right? So I really have to find people who are passionate and just have like a really good work ethic in general, and aren't doing it solely because they're going to make $50 or $100 per article or whatever it is. So. And then, of course, to see if they're covering interesting stuff and interesting content. And I'll say that, 2 of my top writers right now were not very good writers when they started. They had a ton of grammatical errors, lots of, problems with their structure of their paragraphs, and just way too long, way too short. And I worked with them a lot. But over time, they've gotten a lot better. And now I think that, they're 2 of my best writers. And they really started as more of drivers, and I turned them into writers as opposed to writers to drivers.
So How did you know that was going to pay off? I mean, was it just a risk you were willing to take? Because, I mean, that could be kind of time-consuming, coaching somebody through writing.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'd say coaching, but at the same time, like, you know, the first article that they did for me, maybe I spent like an hour with them, right? You know, kind of going back and forth. And over time, it's like, you know, the same thing that with me, right? How I got better was just through practice, right? I don't expect them to write the best article ever in their first article ever for me, but I kind of want to see that growth and I want to give them tips and feedback. And I don't necessarily look at it like a risk. I think it was a little bit just more of a strategy kind of based off what had worked well for me. I mean, I knew that I could go find a writer, right? Someone who was kind of knew what they were doing, but I think that they wouldn't have been able to bring the experience. And I think especially with blogging, I mean, there's some bloggers out there that frankly like aren't very good writers. They're very casual. I mean, there's one blogger, a travel blogger that I follow who in one of his most recent articles used the word like 3 times. You know, he was saying like this, like that in his writing, but he still has a pretty good following because his content is so good. Right. And so I think that that really shows that it's really kind of like what you're talking about. And obviously it's important, you know, to not have grammatical errors and things like that. And you need to clean that up over time, but people can overlook that stuff if your content is that great.
Right. Are you really keen on SEO now? Do you go through that with them, or do you clean it up or sprinkle in some SEO for it, or is it just good, fresh content and you throw it up there and it works?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that when I was first getting started, SEO wasn't super important to me. I was really kind of just writing about my experience and writing about kind of what we thought would do well and what would be interesting. Over time, though, I do all the basics. I mean, all of like the on page, I use like the Yoast SEO plugin and make sure, you know, now I have guidelines for all of my writers, and I hired an editor that reviews every article. So hopefully the writer is kind of like checking for just very basic SEO stuff. So our kind of like SEO strategy is more that we kind of we write about what we think will be interesting and then optimize for SEO later, as opposed to the other way around. And I think if you're trying to build like a community and kind of trying to build more of that type of following, that's generally the better strategy. If you're going for more of like a niche site or something that's going to be super evergreen, you might optimize for SEO first.
Right. So would you recommend our listeners that need a little extra money become a driver?
Oh, man, definitely. I mean, and I think that's kind of the way that I've always looked at it. I mean, if you're doing it full time, it's probably going to be a pretty tough job. I mean, the best thing about driving for Uber or really working for any of these companies is that it's extremely flexible. You can work 0 hours one week, or you can work 50 hours the next week, and you can do it all on your own schedule. So obviously the more hours the less hours you work, you get to pick, all right, Friday, Saturday night, we call those the party hours, right? When everyone's out drinking, calling for Ubers, not driving, right? And they're just calling for rides. So obviously that's when demand's at its highest. So you can generally make the most money during those times. Sure. If you want to drive Tuesday at like a 3 p.m., it probably isn't as profitable. There'll still be rides, but they may not be as profitable as a Friday, Saturday night. So I think that as a driver, if you're doing it part-time, or kind of if you're able to leverage the flexibility and really work the most profitable hours, that's when you can really take advantage of it to its fullest. And I mean, I've been, one of the things that I love is just, I like talking about my entrepreneurial journey, right? Starting this blog, looking at side ventures, side hustles, whatever it is. And I mean, that's one thing that really stood out to me from the beginning. A lot of drivers do look at it. They don't look at this like they want to work as an Uber driver for 10 or 20 years. Some do, but a lot look at it as a stepping stone, right? As something bigger and better, or something that allows them to pursue their passion. And it may not be a lucrative one. It may be like a musician or an actor in LA. I mean, I'm in LA, so there are a lot of actors who are Uber drivers, right? Yeah. And kind of a funny story that I like to share is I've talked to a bunch of actors, and they like Uber because it's flexible, and it's not though because they're getting callbacks for whatever callbacks and stuff. It's so that in case they get a callback, they can go to an audition, right? They're not even getting the auditions. They just know that if they do, and working for Uber will allow them to go do it. Whereas like with a restaurant, they might have set shifts, and they may not be able to go do an audition if they are working, right? So those are kind of the types of people that I think benefit most. And also obviously what we talked about earlier, just all the parallels to running your own business are definitely helpful.
So do you have advice for our listeners that are that are researching a niche, maybe trying to get into, or would you say, I mean, more like just be able to recognize an opportunity when you're standing in the middle of it? Because, I mean, it sounds like it was kind of the latter for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would have to go with what personally worked for me because, I mean, I did a ton of research, right? I was always looking for niches. I mean, I was seeing guys like Pat Flynn or other online marketers talk about like, oh, you could start this site about hunting knives and like rank for this keyword and X and Y and Z. And I'm thinking to myself, like, who the heck cares about hunting knives? Not me. I'm sure there are people who do. But for me, I think that it's really about finding those business opportunities that also align with something you're passionate about. Because let's say that this blog, The Rideshare Guy, after a year, I just had no traction or it wasn't anywhere near the success that I've had. I don't think I would have looked at it like a failed experiment. I think I would have looked at it like, hey, I did this driving for a year. I blogged about my experience. It was cool. I met some cool people. I learned a lot of stuff. Now it's done. Let's move on to the next thing, right? Whereas, you know, if you go and start something like more of like a project or a niche project or some type of opportunity that you're not as passionate about, it just feels like work, right?
Yeah.
It feels like, man, I got to build all these links. I got to reach out to all these people. It's a hassle, right? And I think for me, that's like one of the things I enjoy most now. I mean, I was just on vacation in Mexico last weekend and I was working, right? And my friends are looking at me like, dude, why are you working right now? And I'm thinking to myself, man, I actually like doing this, right? I like replying to emails. I like writing articles. I like doing all that stuff. So if you can find stuff that you're passionate about, you know, the opportunities are going to be everywhere, right? I mean, some are better than others and some are bigger than others, but I think that it's just kind of being aware of them and understanding that when they are there, try to take advantage of them. I mean, you know, a lot of people probably are just sitting on the sideline and looking, but, you know, just go ahead and do it. Odds are you probably won't hit a home run on your first try. I mean, I've started 4 or 5 websites before this, right? This wasn't like, boom, sure. I got lucky. I mean, of course, luck had something to do with it, but I think that there's definitely something to be said to kind of waiting for that opportunity, recognizing it, and then you got to have the kind of the cojones to go out and do it, right?
Right. So when is your wife quitting med school to join you?
Well, I think she's at the point of no return right now. She's almost done with her 3rd year, so she'll be starting her 4th year in a few months here. So I think, and she honestly has no interest in any of what I do. So I think she's probably happy doing what she's doing.
She'll ask you to help about blogging about medical stuff. You watch, man. You watch. You can charge her full price. Say, hey man, I'm in demand.
You know what? I mean, honestly, if I could share one more story. I mean, she's studying for these tests for med school, and some of the kids at her school actually created a program. It's kind of like a study aid called Sketchy Micro. So it's for like microbiology that just helps you memorize all this junk that med school students need to know. And it took off. It sold, you know, hundreds of copies at their school and is now expanding to other schools, and just by word of mouth because it's such a helpful tool. And they actually, I think she's friends with them. She actually told me that they're actually not going to do med school anymore. I think that they're not going to actually end up becoming doctors. This business is going to be more profitable for them. So, you know, these opportunities are really everywhere. It's just about the type of person who is going to recognize them and go out and do something about it.
Hey, you know, kudos to her, man. I could not, with all the government regulations and the things coming out, you've got to really be called, I think, to go into medicine in today's environment. So, you know, we're all going to be glad that she stuck it out because she might be the only doctor in L.A.
Well, at least I'll get that family discount.
I'm going to reach out. Harry, please call your wife, man. I need some penicillin and got a sinus infection. I cut my hand, please. I was doing some niche research on hunting knives, and I cut my hand.
Testing out the merch.
Oh, man. Well, that's awesome. So, yeah, I'm looking at your site. I mean, this is all crazy good. So you had said, so you're writing personally about once a week. You do a podcast once every 2 weeks and a video once a month?
Twice a week. I'm doing quick little YouTube videos that I kind of batch process. So, for example, last Friday, I actually recorded 9 new YouTube videos. So back to back to back. And I mean, I script them out a little bit ahead of time, and they're half stream of conscious, half kind of scripted. But so that's kind of the type of content I'm producing. For me, it's, I started doing the videos just because it was something new that I wanted to try and, just keep on learning and trying new things. So what compelled you to take a look at that? I mean, honestly, it was very similar to like how I got into the whole driving in general. Like I didn't know that there'd be like a huge return on my time or return on my investment. It was just I saw other people doing it, and I saw other bloggers talking about rideshare stuff, and it seemed like they had a little bit of a following, few thousand subscribers. And I said, hey, if other people are doing it and there's people that want to view videos about rideshare, I should probably be on there. Because one thing I've found is that my audiences are very mutually exclusive. And what I mean by that is that my blog audience doesn't listen to my podcast and vice versa. Wow. My YouTube audience, they're on YouTube, right? And they don't always necessarily follow the blog. And I found that, there's like people like to consume content in different mediums, right? Sure. Some people are just podcast people. Some people like to read articles. Some people like videos, right? So for me, it's kind of about finding those big low-hanging fruits. And obviously, I'm sure there's other channels I could do, but it was pretty apparent to me that those were the 3 main avenues, and it's turned out that it's been more articles and YouTube, and the podcast kind of a third place. But so that's kind of where I'm trying to focus most of my energy on producing content. Right. Very cool. And then of course I started a video training course that's all videos for drivers, and that's my paid product. So I figured it would be a pretty natural lead-in if I had a bunch of YouTube videos that were free and kind of led into more complex or more organized fashion with a course. So that's kind of another big reason why I started it, for sure. So is the course doing well? The course is definitely doing well. I think that we started about a year ago, and we've now sold 500 or 600 copies. Okay. So at $100 a pop, I mean, it's definitely, it's in the tens of thousands as far as revenue. And I mean, the costs are pretty low. Most of the traffic I just send, it's hosted on a separate site. So it's MaximumRidesharingProfits.com, mm-hmm. But about 70% of the traffic comes from the rideshare guy. And so it's really just kind of, me mentioning it here and there, and a podcast. Obviously, I have a thing like a banner ad, right? And kind of in my resources page and in my autoresponder. So it's just directing traffic over there. But I mean, the course was one of those things that I really knew nothing about. And it was something I wanted to get better at. I wanted to see if, first of all, are people willing to pay for a premium product? Can I expand this into something bigger and better? And, I'm kind of at this point, I'm really looking at, so I hired a guy, an online marketing guy, to really take care of all the back end. We just spent the past few months building out the affiliate program. So now we have our own affiliate program for the course, which is off to a pretty good start. And we're now actually, that site has a blog where we're doing video, but kind of repurposing my YouTube videos, since most people may not know this, but a YouTube channel, if you get a subscriber, they'll get a weekly email with all of their subscriptions in it. They may not necessarily get an update every time you release a video. It'll have all of their subscriptions, basically. So for us, we looked at that like, hey, not everyone might be seeing these YouTube videos. So we started using a transcript service, and we clean up the transcript a little bit, make it into a little bit more of an article form, but it's still a transcript right under that video. So now we release kind of one article/video every single week. So we're adding content up there, and we'll be testing a new sales page soon and all that good stuff. So the course has definitely gone well, and I've learned a ton about it too. So that's been awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. So what are some parting words of wisdom you'd have for our listeners? Imagine they're on a treadmill, they're on a mountain bike. Yeah. They can't write anything down right now, but as soon as they get to their desk, they get back to where they can get to work, what would you want them to do? I mean, honestly, I would say that just kind of like staying aware, right? I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. Like, people are always looking for like the perfect opportunity. I don't think you necessarily need the perfect opportunity. It's just looking for opportunity where others aren't. I think that's one of the big things for me that's led to a lot of my success. Because frankly, like, I didn't have a lot of competition when I was first getting started, because I was looking at this industry and kind of this niche. I mean, people were out there like, driving as much as they could and making a ton of money driving. For me, I was like, hey, why don't I teach these people who are making a lot of money how to drive, and then I can kind of like leverage and scale, right? So I think for me, it's really all about like not only recognizing that opportunity, but looking for opportunity where others might not be, you know, kind of like be willing to do that dirty work that other people aren't willing to do. Because I think that you'll often, you know, see some good results if you're kind of just like constantly looking for those types of opportunities.
Yeah. And I like the fact, too, you were honest about how, you know, you started in something in what, 2009, 2010, maybe?
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, this was a few years in the making before you even had the chops to build the foundation of something that could grow into something good.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
And I mean, I think that I'm sure you can find stories of people who are more of like an overnight success, but generally,
there's not very many of those.
But even those guys, you know, they're doing stuff that you can learn from, right? Like something led to their success. You know, these things, luck is a part of it, but a lot of these success stories don't happen by accident, right? And so it's like learning from them. What are they doing? I think is really important, and kind of seeing how you can apply that. Because I mean, I'm sure that a lot of your audience probably isn't going to go and start like a rideshare site, but there may be a new opportunity.
If they do, I will send malware out to rip their sites down, tear down their servers. They won't happen, okay?
No, I'm actually very collaborative. I work with everyone. That's kind of that, and that's actually another good example of how I work. I mean, for me, it's like I'm willing to work with a bunch of smaller bloggers, because I know that if I work with 100 smaller bloggers, that those individual bloggers might get a better deal, like out of, you know, exchanging posts with me or something like that. But if I do it with 100 of them, I know that those smaller bloggers aren't going to go do 100. I know that only I am, right? Because I'm willing to kind of like put in that time, whether it's me or, you know, having someone directly who works for me kind of like make it a little more efficient. But that's kind of the strategy that I've always taken. And just, it's more fun to be collaborative too, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, man. Harry Campbell, all the way from L.A., therideshareguy.com. Thanks for coming on the Sales Podcast.
Definitely. Thanks for having me on. It was a blast.
And now you know where I am, so you got to take your car, take the Uber car, find somebody that wants to do wine tasting so you can make money, and come out to Temecula, and we'll do a live episode, all right?
Boom. We'll check your passenger rating, too, while we're at it.
All right. I'm pretty good.
All right. Take care.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on. There you have it. Engineer turned Uber/Lyft driver, blogger, successful entrepreneur. I mean, he quit his job after a year of doing this and is not seeing any slowdown in his future. So, as always, you know, keep your eyes and ears open. Do not be afraid to experiment. Learn from your setbacks. You know, Zig Ziglar would always say, you know, failure is not a person, it's an event. Okay, so setbacks will happen. Keep moving ahead. Look for a need and fill it. Really, that's all that business is. A lot of people will say, you know, find your passion, do what you're passionate about, do what you love. You'll never work a day in your life. And that's true. But, you know, what if you love something that just isn't in demand? If you really want to make the world a better place, and if you want to add income to your bank account, find a need and fill it. You know, I don't think, and when Harry, you know, went to engineering school, doing a ride-sharing podcast was his passion, okay? But solving problems was his passion. It is his passion. And that's what, you know, engineering. They go from point A to point B, and they try to figure out how to get there, right? How to solve that issue. And really, that's what being an entrepreneur is. And that's why that analytical methodology and aptitude has served him well, because he was able to get started, experiment, measure. You know, I always say, if you can measure it, you can improve it. And that's what he's been doing. And that's what I hope you take away from this. Okay. Get started. Take notes. Notice what works. Notice what didn't, and then try to improve it, and then move forward. If you need help with that, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, I'm launching The 5, so the5.us. You come to California, hang out with me for 2.5 days, along with 5 other motivated entrepreneurs. Surround yourself with people that are getting stuff done, that are looking to grow, that are not dilly-dallying, messing around with silly little things like, I don't know what. I don't want to say Snapchat is necessarily silly, but more and more people that I know, like, and trust agree that it is. But it's safe to say that very few people that attend the 5 will be doing adult coloring books. Okay, these are people that are looking to grow and make it happen. And once you enroll and get here, everything else is covered. Okay, your lodging, your meals, your entertainment. And for 2.5 days, you're going to grow. So again, check that out at the5.us. Thanks for listening. Please leave comments. Please rate this on iTunes. Hit me up on Twitter if you have any questions. And as always, remember to sell different.